to you to share a little more about who you are, your background, and we're really excited about your presentation this afternoon.
Okay, hold on, I just got in here, so.
Okay, Erin and Christy, are you guys good to go?
We're here. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
And okay.
Take it away.
Could they hear Christy? Okay. I'll start, and hopefully if we have any sound issues, she can jump on over here with me. So thank you so much for having us. We were thrilled when we were asked to present on self-care strategies for patients and caregivers during this time of COVID, to share our experience, but also to hear your experience, because we're all here to really learn from one another and pull from one another's stories. And so we're excited to be here today. So I'm Erin Pareda. I am a licensed clinical social worker. And I've been up at the Shaw Cancer Center, which is in Edwards, Colorado, for just over 4 years. Prior to that, I was down in Denver at Rocky Mountain Hospital for Children, where I was able to work with their pediatric oncology team. So that's a little bit about me. I'll let Christy introduce herself real quick.
We can't really hear her.
You can't hear Christy?
You able to get closer to your mic?
That better?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Better? Okay. Prior to that, I was in the community mental health arena, as more of a clinical counselor. So, and then I joined Erin over here at the Shaw Cancer Center.
All right, you can go ahead and advance. So we're here today again to talk about self-care, strategies and roles, resources, concepts, ideas, what we've done differently, what we've also done historically, just working with cancer patients in general. So we can go ahead and advance to the next slide. So we thought we'd open it up by talking about really what is self-care, and really taking a moment to define not only what it is, but what it isn't. So according to the can you guys hear me? Okay, so according to the Oxford Dictionary, they define this as the practice of taking action to preserve or improve one's health. And it's also taking a very active role in protecting your well-being and your happiness, particularly during times of stress, which I think we can all agree that, be it a cancer diagnosis or times of COVID, we're all experiencing heightened stress. What it isn't is it's not anything that adds additional stress, complicates your life, or adds anything that's detrimental. So for instance, if my self-care strategy might be hitting the gym because that's what gets me going, but that might add stress to somebody else, might not be their outlet. So it's just a simple example, but it's important to make sure that we know when we're thinking about making our plans for self-care, that we really think about what's really meaningful and purposeful in building up our happiness and our well-being. So you can go ahead and advance.
Okay. So yes, as Erin just talked about self-care and why is it so important for our patients? Well, long before COVID, cancer, naturally anxiety and depression come along with a cancer diagnosis. And so, are you guys able to hear me? I keep forgetting I'm on this. So naturally, depression and anxiety comes along with the cancer diagnosis. So self-care is extremely important. Cancer survivors in the United States take medicine for anxiety or depression about twice the rate as someone who does not have a cancer diagnosis or a history of cancer. And therefore, that's why this is so important, and we want to continue, especially during COVID, because I think our entire nation's experiencing some anxiety and depression right now. So we'll continue.
So post-COVID, we tried to do a little bit of research to see what are we finding about depression and anxiety rates in our cancer patients in particular. Again, as Christy kind of alluded to, we know that with a diagnosis comes heightened anxiety and depression in the cancer population. And so we're curious what's happening to them during COVID. And what is the research showing? And I was surprised to see that there were quite a few more studies out there than I would have anticipated, given we're only 7 months into this process. But what they were finding, and I pulled 3 studies, and I certainly can send links if anyone wants them. One study, low participation, but 91 Tunisian patients that were studied, and they found an incidence of depression to be 29.7%, anxiety to be 69.2%. And what they found was that being single or living alone contributed to those high rates. That was significantly and statistically significant in their study. There was another study in China on 6,213 patients, which is pretty significant, a good population control to pull from. And what they found was 23.4 incidence of depression and 17.7%, which is pretty consistent with some of the research before on anxiety. And again, correlates included people who had a history of alcohol use, previous history of mental illness, and again, pain. If they were experiencing pain, they were more likely to express feeling depressed or anxious. And then the third study I pulled was 421 cancer patients. And this study suggested an incidence of 50.7% anxiety and 46.8 incidence of depression. Again, in that study, it was interesting, same thing. They found that living alone or being single was a factor. And I think Christy and I have seen that historically. When a patient has been diagnosed with cancer, a lot of times in our support groups, we hear these people talk about being single and going through this journey of having cancer without a significant other next to them and how difficult that is. And we've heard from those people that even during this time of COVID, despite the fact that they struggled with this before, it's only heightened their sense of isolation. And so that's certainly been a prominent factor in a couple of these studies and continues to be observationally from our perspective, something that we've seen in some of the patients we've been caring for up here. So in general, I think we can say, we know depression and anxiety go hand in hand with a cancer diagnosis. And I think it's fair to say that in general, anxiety in particular is heightened, but that our patients who are diagnosed with cancer during this time of COVID are certainly experiencing heightened levels of depression and anxiety that we really need to be mindful of as practitioners and social workers and counselors to continue our efforts to screen for distress and to screen for depression and to intervene where we're able. So we can go ahead to the next slide.
So throughout our presentation, we are excited not just to share what we've been doing and what we have learned, but we like to learn from all of you as well. So we're going to have a few polling questions, or we kept referring to them as the pop-up questions. Please read the question and answer and submit, and we'll talk about the results here. In your practices or experience, what have you witnessed to increase most during COVID for your patients?
And I think too, I know this is geared toward the professional, but there might be some patients or caregivers in the audience right now. So I think if you are a patient or a caregiver, if you can share too what your experience has been personally or with somebody that you're caring for or love, that'd be great.
So we're at about 42% voted. So we'll leave it open just for a little bit longer to give anyone who wants to respond a chance, and then I'll close it.
Thank you.
All
So
right.
Becky, maybe you can consider working other polls since you're so good at this one. What do you think?
Is that going to be my side job?
Yeah, it could be coming in handy right now, given this time of year. So.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and close this out.
Okay. Awesome.
There it is.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it looks pretty consistent. Again, like I said, the couple of studies I pulled, anxiety was certainly heightened in the patient population, depression and alcohol drug use, which we've observed as well. We're all there as well. So thank you for contributing, everybody. We're going to make you participate more. So I pulled this little slide, this little blip from the NIH, and I thought it really speaks to new stressors and new anxieties that perhaps didn't exist prior to COVID for our patients. So as you can read here, I won't read it for you, but certainly COVID has added these significant burdens and new dynamics that I've had to learn to kind of work with and address with my patients. And I'm curious again, as we go, feel free to jump in on the chat menu as to what you're seeing and experiencing yourselves. But not only the delay in patients being able to seek their care, to come in for their exams, their studies, but also some other things that have popped up for our patients in particular are the added stressors of For instance, a woman who just completed transplant and has children in high school, and the guilt that she's feeling because of the fear she has of exposure, but that, does she send her kids back to school, or does she have them go virtual because they all want to protect her? But she also doesn't want to be responsible for minimizing their contact with their social networks in a school setting where it can be controlled, where perhaps they can wear a mask and do everything to help support her. The guilt that she was feeling about asking them not to go to school or not see their peers was pretty profound. In the same line and same vein, people who are facing some upcoming procedures, be it transplant, again, I'll use that example, feeling as though the fear and the anxiety and the stress and the guilt of not being able to see loved ones before they go in for something that they may not come out of, they may not survive. And if they do, that strong sense of urgency and that weight of, is this really goodbye? Without that opportunity to really be together with their loved ones, it has changed so dynamically, and added to that stress and the anxiety and the distress that these patients are feeling as they're continuing to embark upon their recommended therapies. So you can go ahead and go to the next slide.
So again, self-care and why it's important for caregivers is long before COVID, anxiety, depression comes along with being a caregiver of a cancer patient, especially if the caregiver is, a spouse or a partner, a son or daughter, mother or father. Transitioning into the caregiver role is a struggle sometimes on relationships. And therefore, for self-care for the caregivers is just as important. So they can, it's like, carrying the airplane, where you put your own oxygen on before the other, your partner, the person sitting next to you. And it's that important to help the caregivers recognize that they need to take time for themselves, and that it is not, they shouldn't feel guilty about that, but it is, something they need to focus on as well, to be able to be a strong caregiver. There's many different reasons also that caregivers may have more anxiety and depression, as maybe their own age, maybe their own health. Again, going financial problems, and just the strain it puts on a relationship, because sometimes that relationship from being a spouse or a partner to a caregiver can tend to be a negative relationship, because they're trying to get, their partner to do what they need for their own treatment and stuff. So it can be a tough role, and that's always been before COVID. Now, post-COVID.
Yeah, so post-COVID, again, it stands, and I know someone put in the chat, this is just as important for healthcare workers, and you're absolutely right. So everything we're saying here can apply across the board. I think there's another session maybe tomorrow on healthcare workers specifically with this topic. But everything you see and hear here is applicable to healthcare workers. And I think I'm feeling it. I need this reminder more than anybody as well, especially as we're working longer hours and giving more to our patients and our staff. The level of support that we have given to our staff during this time has been significantly increased. And so as we continue down this journey and through this pandemic, I think, yes, heed all of this advice and take it internally to yourselves as well. So, but again, caregivers, again, as Christy alluded to, they have in some instances, in some studies, suggest higher rates of depression and anxiety, if not just as much. And it can be really hard for caregivers to feel like they are allowed the space to take time for self-care. But post-COVID, our assumption is, despite the fact that I couldn't find a study to really prove this, is that we can assume that similar to patients, they're probably following the same trajectory of increased rates of depression, increased rates of anxiety, questioning how they can show up, how they can be there for their loved ones, how they can keep them safe. I'm hearing that a lot in our practice. How do they protect their loved one who's going through diagnosis and treatment, and then also being removed, especially in the initial phases of COVID, from the conversations when we had lockdowns and we had restrictions on visitors. And some of our institutions, people on here may still have those in place. And so feeling so in the dark as a caregiver for someone you love and not being able to be present for those conversations has been really taxing and extremely difficult for a lot of people. So we'll get there a little bit later and talk more about that. But again, I think our assumption is caregivers absolutely are experiencing increased rates of anxiety and distress. So we're going to do another poll question. Leading into this question about visitation. So our question is, many centers and hospitals are not allowing family members in. During COVID, what is your center's visitation policy? And perhaps it's ever changing like it is here, but as it stands now, where do you all sit?
We've got some responses trickling in, and in the interest of time, I'm going to end it.
Okay. One. Okay. A little bit mixed and no visitors. And our center is a little mixed between departments. So in our infusion center, you know, our medical oncologist feels really strongly that it's a long day and it's overwhelming, and having a visitor and someone present is really important. So on that side, we're allowing one. On our radiation oncology side, those visits are pretty quick in and out, and our radiation oncologist feels really strongly that she would rather have visitors telehealth into those appointments. So we actually have a mixed bag here ourselves. Thank you for participating. I'm gonna jump on to one surprising observation. I'm curious if you guys have experienced this or had patients express this to you, but on the flip side of all this, I've had some people come to me and say, you know, Erin, it's really bizarre. I actually have less FOMO, fear of missing out, and I feel more validated because everybody now understands what it's like to have to isolate yourself, be cautious about getting sick, and they're feeling as though it's almost more empowering that the whole world can have this concept of what they've been doing for so long. And so I'm just curious, you can chat in it, you cannot, it's up to you guys, but this has come up for us. It's been an observation that we've had several patients mention to us that they actually feel more supported and that people actually understand. And I have a letter, I'm gonna read it, it's a bit long, hopefully I can read fast but clear, that I thought was really profound that I sent out to our survivors back in April when we were in the throes of all this. And it's called An Oncologist's Prescription for Managing Fear and Chaos in the COVID-19 Pandemic. It's by Douglas Flora, who's a physician, and it was written on April 12th of this year. And I can share this with you guys if you'd like it. Okay, here we go. When physicians present at medical conferences, we usually start with a slide disclosing any potential conflicts of interest to our audience. I probably need to disclose two things here. First, I'm an infuriating and an inexhaustible optimist. Second, I'm a cancer doctor, but also a recent cancer patient myself. And I understand intimately how it feels when your world unexpectedly spins out of control. With the arrival of COVID-19 on our shores and our lives suddenly looking as if they were cut from the pages of a Michael Crichton novel, we are all facing new fears and uncertainties previously unimagined. It's only natural we now find ourselves seeking guidance on how best to survive in this new world. My prescription, ask cancer patients. These patients were going about their normal lives when a cruel and terrifying, reality intruded. Sound familiar? They are trained in uncertainty. They have been forced by their diseases to adapt, survive, and thrive amidst their own personal chaos. These patients' experiences can offer valuable lessons and simple but powerful tools we can use to adapt to the current COVID-19 pandemic. Cancer patients must adapt to nearly impossible situations each day with grace, courage, and dissoluble hope. Real applied hope is a powerful thing to behold. These patients embrace it. Can we tackle the coronavirus with a similar approach? I watch this hope with my patients, when my patients overcome otherwise insurmountable hurdles every day. These lessons have informed my perspective as I offer this prescription to help you through the next very difficult months. Hope on. For those of you on the front lines working in healthcare, hope will be the fuel we burn every morning when we head to the hospital. We learn from this the resolve we've seen in our own patients over years of fighting in the trenches. You can put this to work too. Keep your own hope alive, no matter how dark it gets. This too shall pass. However, hope alone may not be enough. We must face some grim realities. Many lives are going to be lost before another new normal, returns. I'm reminded of a dear patient and survivor. This young mom was diagnosed with breast cancer while caring for her husband as he was dying of cancer himself. I asked her how she coped so well under such incredible stress and sadness. Her response has stuck with me for over 10 years, and I've shared this simple phrase with hundreds of patients since. When there is no wind, we row. Right now, our nation has no wind to power our sails. Despite the fear of the unknown, we each need to row in order to support the normal rhythms of life. We must do our own part to preserve this critical physical distancing and move the boat a little each day as a nation. Already we see what this collective individual work and self-discipline has accomplished at the pandemic's epicenter, as life was resuming today in Wuhan, China. If we do the hard, necessary things they did to isolate, test, mitigate, and separate, our own discipline will be similarly rewarded. My patients get this, and despite all of their fear and uncertainty, I still see them rowing their own boats each day. In the coming months, the wind will return and fill the sails again, but until then, we row. I'll stop there, but I'll send it on just because in concept of time, but it was a really powerful letter that he wrote that I think could be really, a lot of our patients responded as to how moving it was and touching. So I'll send that out as a slide, but we'll keep going on. So you can go ahead and move to some interventions. Let's talk about those. And I think Chrissy's going to take it.
Yeah, we'll talk about some interventions and some of our strategies that we implemented here. But I do want to validate some of the comments that have come in. Yes, I agree with the PPE and us having to wear masks, and you know, we look all the same in our scrubs here, at least. I'm not sure at your own centers, as well as it is difficult to make more connections with some of our patients than not, especially those people who, you know, do speak a second language and maybe having hearing difficulties. We absolutely try to, you know, connect and do the best we can. And some of our strategies that we've implemented more, increased more, do speak to some of that. As well as, I agree too, another comment came in that we have found, Erin and I have found very common, is when, you know, treatment is over, you know, people are ready to begin living again and nothing's really changed. And so we've had a lot more, I would say, you know, contact with our patients that are done and post-treatment than we've had before, because they still feel connected to us here and safe here as well. So that's something more we have found as well. So, you know, post-treatment connections with us, and we try to keep those up as best we can. So, but going on to the next slide, we're going to talk about our experience and what we've implemented as well. And before I start with what we have implemented, I want to explain we had to come up and create one of the things that helped us with our team, because we have a multidisciplinary team of Erin and myself. We also have dietitians and exercise physiologists and chaplains. And so what we had to come up with is a grid that, COVID restriction grid, I would say, for some of our activities that aligns with our state, the Colorado. As you know, we all have the same COVID dial. And so that it has to align with the different colors and what stage we're in. So like the summer, we're a little less restricted, so we could have more, you know, support groups in person, outside, with a number of people. So we made up a grid that was, so that could be transparent with our team as well as our patients, so they understood if the dial moves in our county, then that means these activities go to this, or this activity is no longer available. So that is something I encourage centers to do, because there's a lot of confusion out there around these, you know, where your county is and where, you know, what's allowed and what's not with the restrictions. And so we try to make it as transparent as we could with this. So now to explain what we have done, we've done some weekly emails. You can go to the next slide, please. Sorry. Weekly emails to survivors with practical tips and tools. These emails included pictures of all of us, because a lot of people used to come in for big activities. We take hikes, or we would have big support groups. We have luncheons, we have a speaker. We had a lot of in-person events that were really really nice and welcoming to our cancer survivors and their caregivers, and a great chance for them to all socialize together, and not just sitting in infusion and talking amongst, it's somewhere outside of there. So, so in replace of that, we did a weekly email, and we included our staff members' photos of us, as well as different, every disciplinary, every nutritionist, the fitness, we all put links in and special activities and tools for them to do and focus on. And this was a huge hit, our huge hit with everyone. And now we have continued it as a monthly one, because that was all during when we were all shut down in March when we did weekly. But it was huge, so we brought it back as a monthly one, and everyone really appreciates it. Next slide. Okay, we also did, this is one where we try to increase the peer-to-peer. So within our own patient population, as well as cancer survivors, we try to connect each patient with a peer. So they could talk over the phone, they could Zoom together, they could, as well as share the national peer connections that we have available to us, such as the Imarin Angels, I think is one. And next slide. As I mentioned, we hosted small outdoor gatherings. This summer was a little less restrictive. We were able to be outside more. So we did host support groups outside. As I mentioned, the number of participants, varied during what restrictions were. But it was very interesting, and surprising, not so surprising when you think of all this, but our number of participants increased for support groups during this time, because this is a place they felt safe to come to. This is a group that they felt that they could, it was an outlet for them where there wasn't many other outlets all summer long. Then we did fitness classes outside. We would do a hike, walking groups, yoga outside, even nutrition classes were outdoor gatherings. So these were well attended to, as I said, because this was a safe place and something that they could connect with other people at. So it was a special, those are some scenes that we always have had, but we kind of upped them a little and made them more, safe. Well, we had to be more safe, obviously, and COVID conscious. So, all right, now we have, next slide, please. Okay, so we are going to do another polling question and learn from all of you. We have, Zoom and support groups we've not dove completely into those yet. And we're just wondering if any of you in your organizations has transitioned to any online platforms to engage patients. And what are you finding if you have done so?
And this may be more in relation to online support groups or really specific groups that you're offering, maybe that you didn't do before.
Leave it open for 3 more seconds. All right.
Okay. That's really helpful. Again, kind of split, which I think we see in, in general with support groups. You can have a month where you can have a dozen people show up, and the next month you might have one. So, it looks like some people are having more people participating and some are having few people. But it looks like for the most part, you're getting some. So that's good, really helpful. We can go on to the next slide. We wanted just to take a minute to talk a little bit about touch. And this kind of goes back to the beginning when I was talking to people who are single, who are isolated. This could be pre-COVID, post-COVID. I think it's applicable across the board. But as you all know, we are coming together in smaller and smaller groups. We are minimizing our contact, our patients in particular. And so we've lost human connection and human touch. And I think we need to be cautious about that because it's such a valuable tool and resource for everybody. It's part of our human nature. And so I just wanted to offer up some tips and tools and resources that may or may not help your clients, or your patients, or yourselves as it relates to this particular topic. But we're fortunate up here, and other centers I know across the Colorado are as well, to have things like oncology massage that's offered. And during the initial shutdown, everything went down, including that. And I know Dora came back online in May and was able to restart those services. And fortunately, we were able to restart that as well. So of course, massage and healing touch are two ways to sort of achieve some of that and address some of that deprivation that we would certainly, we're encouraging our patients to utilize if they feel safe. Everyone needs to have a spectrum of safety for themselves to really assess what feels okay versus what doesn't, and to honor that. But certainly that's one resource, that can be utilized, for the purpose. If that's unaffordable, unattainable, unachievable, unrealistic, unsafe, some other ideas and alternatives that we came across that we've kind of given to our patients include dancing. There's some theories that having your feet on the ground and movement instigates some feelings and sensations and mimics touch. Acupressure pins and points on the hands and the wrists. I know our acupuncturists up here were willing to place some temporary pins in the ear, which was helpful for acupressure. Yes, LiveSpark is amazing. I see you on here. I used to refer some patients to you guys. Meditation. So it could be something as simple as a walking meditation, a mindful meditation, an eating meditation, taking a hot shower, those sorts of things, and honing in on the feelings and the sensations and encouraging that can replace that loss. Self-massage, of course, and then some people say, I know I use these a lot with little kids who had seizures, and neurology, our practice down there used it quite a bit, was weighted blankets. That feeling of comfort and touch and pressure, and sleeping with a body pillow. So, those are just some tools and tips if you're coming across that with people that you're working with, that maybe you could throw out to offer suggestions, if indeed you're seeing that become a challenging issue. So wanted to offer that up. So we're going to do a little breakout session, and yes, we are going to force you to participate. We have, again, we really want to learn from you guys. 5 minutes, it doesn't have to be long. But our question to you guys really is, we've shared what we've done up here, some of the strategies we've taken to engage patients during this really wild time, through, outdoor offerings and online platforms and weekly emails to stay connected. But we're really curious to know about your centers or your experiences, some of the different and unique ways in which you have engaged your patients and caregivers to offer support during this crazy time of COVID. So I think they're going to break you into small groups. And if you have anything you're willing to share, we would really appreciate it, because we're always looking for new ways.
Erin, quick question. We've got about 15 minutes left for your presentation. How long do you want to do breakouts for?
Let's do 3 minutes.
Let's
do 3 minutes.
3 minutes? Okay.
Yeah, let's do 3. You guys have to work fast.
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
All right. So you will automatically just get added into there. So here we go. Hi, to those of you that are still in here, did you want to get popped into a breakout room? If so, I can add you to one.
Hey, Christy.
Hi, Ivy. We'll let people come back in from their breakout rooms.
Wow, that was fast.
I think I booted myself out.
Yeah, once that message came up, you should have had still 2 minutes to keep talking.
But I think I even did it before it. I'm clicking from computer to computer.
Ah,
So
I'm not quite sure how I got back here either. Oh well. So for those of us that are here, I was just sharing that I am part of a program that already does phone and video outreach to individuals with cancer and their caregivers. So it's a standard practice for me.
I work at the health department, so I don't have any people.
Peggy or Karen, did you get a chance to share? Peggy, I think you were in with me. So about 30 seconds, people will start automatically coming back to the room. Oh, you're muted, Janice.
Sorry, how did we pop back here accidentally, or how did I?
I don't know. Did you click come back when the message popped up? Or did somebody leave your room and maybe since your room was empty? I'm not sure.
I'm not sure either. So it was a mystery.
Okay.
Awesome.
Thank you all for participating in that.
Yeah. So I don't know if you guys were able to throw some of your ideas or experiences into the chat room or into the chat message, but please feel free to do so. And as we see them pop up, we'll address them. But for the sake of time and questions and answers at the end, we'll keep going. But again, we will would love for you to put them in there so we can kind of see what you have done if you're willing to share. I will type what we talked about, which isn't exactly, and put it in there. So go ahead, Christy.
Okay, so self-care is important to. Obviously, we talked about all day this whole hour, but when we're talking to our patients and we're explaining to our patients, to how we define it and how they might define it, we want to make sure they know it's not a you're not being selfish and stuff like that. We all likely have a different definition of self-care, and the following are some key components and thoughts that we consider to encompass what self-care is for ourselves, along with what we've observed in our own patients. So we will get through these components and some strategies and in the next 10 minutes.
Okay, you can go ahead and advance. All right, so when I was putting this together with Christy, we were thinking, okay, what are the components of self-care? And this is not scientifically backed. We didn't find this in any research article, but this is really what we felt, the nuts and bolts of what really needs to be there for self-care to happen. So the first component, you can advance to the next slide, from what we've observed and experienced ourselves, is permission. We have to give ourselves permission to engage in self-care, whether we're a healthcare worker, we're a patient, we're a caregiver. Without it, we lose track of it. And permission isn't necessarily giving up on your responsibilities or losing sight of your commitments. It is a slow process that we have to acknowledge will take time and gradual. So don't underestimate the small steps that you can take by incorporating and giving yourself permission to engage in self-care. So that's number one. Number two is planning, which I think is, again, so essential. When we get a cancer diagnosis and when we're faced with cancer and now COVID, cancer calls the shots half the time, which pulls away at our control and our power. And so if we can take a really strong stance and make a plan and make contingency plans, you need to have backups. It's so important as we face so much uncertainty. We need to prepare for the unexpected. We need to prepare for just different circumstances. What are you going to do if you have to quarantine? Your self-care is probably going to look very different than if you're not quarantined. What are you going to do if your loved one is hospitalized, or if you have cancer and you're hospitalized? What are you going to do if, this goes back to actually what I was just talking about with someone from public health. What are you going to do if you have to cross train in a different job role because we have to have contingencies here on site and you're so overwhelmed? How are you going to support yourself and plan around that so that you're not constantly in an overdriven state where you're feeling totally uneasy? So having a plan is super important. And then finally, we feel like consistency is key. Don't wait until you need self-care to do it. You've got to start now. Make it a priority. Do it before you think you need it, because kind of by the time you need it, it's probably too late. Kind of like pain. We don't want to get behind pain. When we're behind it, we're always constantly chasing to catch up. So do something for yourself every day. Encourage your patients and your caregivers to find what that is for them. Encourage them to plan, and hopefully that will be the key to being successful in caring for themselves through this really difficult time. So now we just have some strategies we're going to talk about. And I'll take you into the first one. We came up with these 15. Again, this is observation as well as personal experience. Self-care strategy number 1 is talking. I think, we come from a place where this is what we do and we believe in it. There's no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside you. If you're carrying heaviness around, think about outreaching to family and friends. Encourage your patients to talk to professionals, to peers, support groups, be it online, if they're in person. I'm going to advance to the next slide because I think this is helpful. It's something I've used with cancer patients before. It's the ring theory. I don't know how many of you use this with your patients, but the concept is you comfort in and you dump out. So your patient with a cancer, for instance, is at the center of the circle. If you think of a pond and you drop a rock and the ripples. So anyone in the crisis, that could be the COVID crisis, that could be cancer crisis, whatever it is, they are able to dump out. They get to unleash out and talk to people on all the outer rings. And you start with immediate family, closest friends, colleagues, and move out from there. And the theory is that you can dump out, but those people can't dump in. They have to comfort in. They have to offer listening. And so we really want to encourage our patients, but also the caregivers, know your circle. They may have different circles for their different needs, but if they know that in advance, and it goes back to planning, it can be really powerful. Here's some other resources that you all probably know about, but for peer networking, the IRM and Angels and whatnot. So it's okay, go ahead and go on to the next slide.
Okay, yeah, so as Erin discussed earlier, some of what her good self-care and what I enjoy too is the exercise. However, which we all know that is a great coping skill. However, we want to make sure that when we're talking to our patients, that we want to be mindful and let them know, to really allow yourself to listen to their bodies and set realistic goals and expectations if the exercise is something they've always really done and enjoyed and excelled at, that during treatment they might not be able to, achieve what they've been able to before, and we don't want them to, become more depressed that they're not able to run 3 miles in a really low time, because so we want to warn them of that and be realistic, and but encourage them to continue with what fills their bucket for self-care. And if exercise is one, these are all great things to do.
Next slide. So meditation, I think someone popped one up. There are so many amazing apps right now for meditations, and it can be all kinds of different types. Again, I alluded to a walking meditation before, eating meditation, sensations, guided meditation, sound healing, breath work, silent meditations. So many applications. You can go to the next slide. I listed a few here that you, again, may be familiar with, but Headspace, Insight Timer, I particularly love that one. Calm, Aura, Beautify, Loving Meditations, and there's a cancer care meditation app. A lot of them are free to download. If they want to expand into deeper, bigger options through those websites, there's usually a fee for service. But really something that anyone can do any time of the day to really re-engage in the present and be very mindful and stay rooted. So great resources there.
Okay, another one is reading and writing. I found many patients enjoy journaling. We are fortunate enough, we had a few journals donated to us, so we were able to give a few away during this time and to encourage the journaling. And in the reading, writing, reading something fun. Some people love to, just allow themselves to read a fun book instead of something, something about their diagnosis. Legacy projects at the next slide are some resources for this. So the Healing with Words, the cancercare.org, Writing Through Cancer, and that's another one, legacyproject.org. So just, as it says, read anything that you love. And this goes to us as well.
Music, it's so healing. I think we all know that, but it comes in many forms. There's sound healing, which again, we've been fortunate to have a therapist up here who can offer sound healing with her beautiful bowls. If that's not accessible to you, again, some of those applications listed before have some sound and music, sound healing applications. But drumming, classical music, music therapy, if you're at a center, fortunate to have a music therapist that comes in with a harp or piano, so healing. And really anything they love. It doesn't have to be anything riveting. It can just be what makes them happy.
Next slide. Okay, so again, finding what fills your bucket. Something, with the patients, I always ask, what have you always done? What's a hobby you like? Some people is art, so encouraging to continue with that, and drawing, painting, ceramics, watercolor, glass, creative art classes, art therapy. There's some great online resources. I do not have any at the ready right now for you, but also just having those the coloring books with the pencils are great meditation and expressive as well. Next slide.
All right, seems silly, but it goes back to touch, right? Taking a hot bath or hot shower, soaking and relaxing, taking time to breathe and decompress. Add aromatherapy to that mix, a few drops of oils, and you can have yourself a really good self-indulgent kind of experience. If you want to go to the next slide, I don't know how many of your patients are cautious about what they're using on their bodies, but there's a website that they could go to that they can assess the toxicity levels within their products. This is one that I've found that came back from an Integrative Oncology Society conference that they were suggesting and encouraging us to look and utilize. So think about patients' needs. Do they need a shower chair to be comfortable? Just those sorts of things to keep in mind.
Okay, next slide. Self-care. Another one is, to enjoy time together with friends and connect with friends. Enjoy Zoom calls and schedule Zoom calls. I think those are really important and a safe way to connect with other people. I think those have become very popular during all this. Family Zoom calls, people have gotten in touch with people from high school. So this is one to, encourage patients to do.
Cooking and baking, and I know we're all very leery of the COVID-19 that many of us have gained during this time. So AICR is an amazing resource. Our nutritionists use it all the time. Awesome recipes, tons of education for cancer patients and caregivers. Really great, reliable resource there. A lot of our patients really love Chris Carr and her book, Crazy Sexy Cookbooks. And then the Cancer Fighting Kitchen is another that our dietitian recommends to a lot of our patients, especially to their caregivers who are preparing the foods for them.
Okay, so in lieu of time, we're going to kind of go through our slides pretty quickly, but another one is just to say no, really have good, healthy boundaries. Do not feel guilty of saying no to something that might become overburdening, and really talking to people and yourselves, because right now in our jobs, everyone's doing more than we normally do. So it's important to be able to voice and say no when you need to. Next slide.
And Christy, I'll whip through the next three and just bundle them together. Acupuncture, massage, Reiki, healing touch. Again, using LifeSpark, using your resources that you have near to you. If you're fortunate enough, like we are, to have these services kind of built in, amazing resources for patients to help insomnia, anxiety, depression, neuropathy, hot flashes, you name it. Body awareness, touch, relaxation, all just really great things. So the final one, I guess we would say, I'll let Christy talk to.
The salon services, the ones that getting a mani-pedi, getting your hair done when it's allowed and not restricted. The Walgreens Feel More Like You program. Those are some examples.
Yeah. So again, digging deep, what are your self-care strategies? Really knowing them physically, mentally, emotionally. It all combines and creates, your concept of self-care. So we've listed strategies. Again, love to hear from you guys. we have maybe a minute for question and answer. So we'll open it up to you guys if you had anything else you wanted to share.
So I know there was a number of strategies and people talking a little bit about what they're doing in terms of meetings and how they're really engaging patients. And this has been great. I have to tell you, ladies, I have the Zeal app on my phone, so I was considering maybe a massage as I was looking at your beautiful slides. But I think Deb, our pets.
Yeah.
Our pets, and that came up in the slide from Fight CRC, as many people were really support that connection with pets as much as family and social networks.